CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
And now, back to the man who's never afraid to throw virtual hands, the social media samurai, the tyrant of Twitter, the keyboard snatcher of souls, Tim Graham and Friends.
It's Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. And in just a little bit, we're going to be joined by Buffalo Bandits broadcaster John Gurtler, going to talk about his Borrelli Award as the top media personality in the National Lacrosse League this year, and also the Bandits Championship Series against the Saskatchewan Rush, which begins tomorrow night, Friday night at KeyBank Center. Before we get to that, though, we're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills and the schedule, which was released on Wednesday night. Jonah, I know that we've kind of poked fun at the idea of the schedule becoming a newsworthy event in and of itself, making headlines, borderline national holiday. The Athletic treated it as such because people love to read it. People love to look at it. And I know that you had to do quite a bit of coverage yourself over at WIVB Channel 4. So let's talk about the schedule a little bit more.
I've never worked harder in my life. This is the third show. We had a couple different live shows on our web app that I've talked about the schedule. I wrote a analysis piece and helped with our main news story coverage, and a lot of it was watching before the schedule that came out, the leaks, and there were no official announcements of any Bills games before the schedule came out. There were some reports and various indications on what some of the games would be. And as we talked last week, both of us think it's a little bit overcooked how much schedule analysis there is before the schedule comes out. But once it's out, there's plenty of things to analyze in terms of how it shakes out for the Bills, the competitive advantages or disadvantages or quirks of the schedule that the Bills might like or dislike or might be favorable for the record or not, and the fan experience of what road games on what weekends are more attractive travel opportunities and which home games, the home games in warmer weather earlier in the season are more attractive days. If you're not a season ticket holder, if you're going to single games, those are the games that are more popular and also more expensive tickets. But there's some historic value in being at that Week 18 game or one of the final two home games late in the season that will be the last regular season game ever played in this 53-year-old stadium. And potentially, if the Bills don't have a good season, the last game of the season, the last game ever at the stadium, that might happen in the playoffs, or it could happen in the final week of the regular season.
Yeah, it was interesting. I saw a tweet yesterday from Ross Tucker, the former NFL offensive lineman, spent some time with the Bills now in broadcasting. And he said that from a player's perspective, when the schedule comes out, they look at things in this order. Number one, when your bye is. Number two, Thursday night games, because twofold. Number one, the short week. They want to know where the short week is, which they hate, but also the mini bye that comes from having 10 days off until the next game, if it's played on Sunday, which it usually is, sometimes Monday night, which is even better. And then third was primetime games. And then fourth, he said, maybe division games. And so beyond that, the players don't think much about the schedule. And there was some conversation then in the comments. I believe Jay Feely jumped in and some others just regarding, the players really don't care that much about the schedule other than from logistics, how they plan their lives, what they're going to be doing with their families, how many Sundays do they have. It's a story that I wrote last year about that Sunday rhythm that the Bills got on, and to the point when, including the playoffs, they played 14 straight Sundays and they went 11-3 in those games because, at least partially due to the routine. They get in that rhythm that they love. And one of the 3 games that they lost was to the Jets in the regular season finale when the starters were rested. So put an asterisk even on that loss. But the Bills have a lot of Sunday games here too. They get, again, it's spending time with your family. It's knowing when you're going to be installing the playbook on certain days, what your rest and rehab days are going to be. But some things stand out. To Ross Tucker's point, the most important thing to him or to the players, the Bills bye comes in week 7, probably earlier than a team would like, but also not terrible towards the middle of the season. I think most teams would prefer middle to end of the season for the bye to rest up and get ready for the playoffs. Number 2, the number of Thursday night games. The Bills have 2. Week 3 against Miami, which would give them a short week after playing the Jets in week 2 at the Meadowlands, and then at home against Miami that Thursday night. And then again, week 12 at Houston, which is on the short week after a home game against Tampa Bay. The Houston game is interesting for a couple of reasons. It's the only game outside of the Eastern time zone. The Bills have a relatively cushy schedule. And from a fan standpoint too, Houston is the only game outside of the Eastern time zone. And if you're somebody who likes to travel to Bills games, it's probably the only game in which you'll have to take a connecting flight, because the Bills road games at Atlanta, that's a hub, at Carolina, Charlotte is a hub, and then Pittsburgh and Cleveland are drives. Everything else is a direct flight, with the exception of Houston. So, and of course the Bills fly charter, so you don't have to worry about them getting direct, but it's just, the mileage is low. There's one fewer road game than home, this year, because that's what it is for the AFC East. There are 9 home games, 8 road games, and one of the cross division teams are from the AFC South, which is down. And then of course the Bills AFC East schedule, those 3 teams are kind of rebuilding or trying to get themselves off the mat in some way. So the Bills, I think, have the 8th easiest schedule, and all the teams ahead of them did not make the playoffs last year. So you can say that the Bills are the best team with a soft schedule.
Yeah, and they were a first place team. It doesn't look like a first place schedule. They do play some Super Bowl contending teams, the Chiefs and the Ravens, the Bengals, the Eagles, but all of those games are at home. All of those games are in the second half of the season. Well, not all of them. The Ravens is the opener, but 3 of those games in the second half of the season after they'll get their 2 defensive players who are suspended for the first 6 weeks back. So that's
great point.
Something that maybe helps the Bills a little bit, not having to see the Chiefs or the Bengals early on when they're a bit weakened in the pass defense. More time for Max Harrison and some of the rookies to get acclimated before they have to go against the Chiefs or the Bengals or the Eagles. The Bills play the Ravens in the first game of the season. That's a playoff rematch, one of the toughest games on their schedule. They played the Chiefs in week 9. In between that, they don't play any teams that made the playoffs last year. A large number of those games are at home. There's a really good opportunity for the Bills to be 7-1 going into that Chiefs game, perhaps even, or 6-1 going into that Chiefs game, perhaps even 7-0, and having the Chiefs at home and the way they've won those regular season games in the past. It's not out of the realm of possibility to see the Bills starting 8-0 or 7-1 and getting off to a really good start before the schedule does get more difficult and more road trips. And that Houston game on a short week almost looks like the most difficult part of the schedule for the Bills. But you can really see 14, maybe even 15 wins on this Bills schedule and an opportunity for the Bills to shoot for that 1 seed. And I think that's very important. I think this is a bit of a 1 seed or bust type season for the Bills, not only to get as many more home games as he can for the fans, for the farewell to the stadium narrative, and how much that might mean to have the AFC Championship game at home and that be the true last game ever played in that building. And perhaps this is how the Bills can get over that hump and get to the Super Bowl, by being the number 1 seed and having the AFC Championship game at home. As the Bills have won more games, I think, than any other team in the league over the past 5 years or whatever it's been, but they haven't gotten all the way to that point where they're hosting the AFC Championship game. That's the one thing they haven't done yet, and that might be the thing they need to do in order to ultimately make it to the Super Bowl.
I call it the Super Series. I think there are 5 games that matter the most. And again, you could quibble with, I think, one of the entrants on this list, but I think that the Bills season, for us to find out what they're made of and if they're worthy of playing and winning the Super Bowl this season, and you mentioned most of them, Baltimore in week 1, Kansas City in week 9. I'm including Pittsburgh. That game is at Pittsburgh, week 13, because I'm assuming that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback of the Steelers, and that is a Super Bowl winning coach and a Super Bowl winning quarterback. That game also being on the road will raise the degree of difficulty for the Bills. Cincinnati, week 14, because Joe Burrow is that good. He's the best passer in the NFL last year, MVP caliber player. Also a coach and quarterback combination that went to a Super Bowl together. And then Philadelphia in week 17, which is the one that will really probably have Highmark Stadium shaken the most, because week 18 against the Jets, you could be looking at a situation where Josh Allen doesn't play much. The Bills are resting their starters and everybody's catching their breath for the playoffs. So I'm calling it the Super Series this year. And beyond that, the games are kind of interchangeable. Yes, Tampa Bay was a playoff team last year. The Bills have them in week 11, but I don't know. The others just have that cachet of the teams that they face multiple times, despite not being non-division opponents. The Bills faced Baltimore twice last year. They've faced Pittsburgh twice in the same season. They faced Cincinnati twice in the same season. The one game didn't count in 2022 because of DeMar Hamlin, but they went to Cincinnati and then hosted Cincinnati in that season in the playoffs. And then, of course, they play Kansas City twice, seemingly every season. So these are the rivalries that come up with outside of your division. They're the best teams. They're the reigning champions. They have all the MVPs, Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, and, of course, Josh Allen in that mix too.
I'd throw the game against the Texans into that series as well. I mean, they lost there last year. That's a team at that point in time
Another
that was
playoff
ahead
team
of the Bills in the standings, and could have been a team that had home field advantage in a playoff rematch if they didn't suffer some injuries and slip a bit down the stretch. And then when you combine that with, as you mentioned earlier, the longest travel date for the Bills this season, a short week playing a Thursday night game, that's one of the tougher games on the schedule.
You're right.
Against the team they might need a tiebreaker against to get a home playoff game.
I probably should have added Houston and then made it a Super Six, because your division comprises 6 games, right? And kind of the premise of my column was, forget the AFC East. These are the games that matter. I think the reason I didn't include the Texans, though, is that all those other teams have accomplished coach quarterback combinations, whereas Houston still a young coach and a young quarterback who've kind of fizzled at the end there. But still, you're right. I think I probably could have done that.
It's also notable that none of those games are division games, and I understand why. I don't think any of the division teams are the most formidable opponents on the Bills' schedule, but the Patriots might be a little better this year. The Jets are a bit of an unknown, but might not be as lost as they were in the last couple of years. The Dolphins could bounce back in some ways. They could slide down in other ways. But I do think in order to win as many games as possible and potentially have the number 1 seed, the Bills probably need to go 6-0 or 5-1 in those division games, which they've been able to do a number of times over the years. But it's hard for any NFL team to dominate their division year after year, game after game. And, maybe we're underestimating how challenging some of these divisional games could be for the Bills later in the season.
If I were to do my AFC East power rankings, it would be Buffalo, New England, Miami, New York, because Miami is in disarray. Tyreek Hill at the end of the season said he wanted out. Now that's been smoothed over, but now Jalen Ramsey says he wants a trade. The best players on the Dolphins don't want to be there, making a lot of waves, and I don't know. It just seems like trouble ahead in Miami to me. Now, of course, this is May 15th as we're recording this. There's a long way to go, and many questions to be answered. And I think we talk about it all the time on this podcast, is that teams really don't even know who they are until probably sometime in October. A long way to go. But as it stands right now, based on what we've seen last year, the last time all these players and teams were on the field, the Bills clearly look like the class of the AFC East, and a legitimate Super Bowl contender.
The thing the Bills don't have working against them right now that sometimes is the case is they don't have that division opponent that maybe isn't great against the rest of the league, but has their number or has some things about the matchup figured out. The Jets have been that team for the Bills in the past, the Dolphins at various points in times, but right now it doesn't seem like there's a team that the Bills struggle with because it's a divisional opponent with the familiarity more so than the average NFL opponent would.
Jonah, do you have any thoughts on Eric Stahl being added to the Buffalo Sabres front office?
I think we got into this a bit on our last episode, and I think that if it wasn't for some of the baggage,
well, I guess let me this. Like we did talk about it last week. I left off a little an important part of that question that I posed. Here we are a week later, nothing else has happened. But there was a belief and some reports out there that the Sabres were perhaps on the verge of adding a senior advisor type role to work with Kevin Adams, somebody with general manager experience. Now there's been some movement with front offices and coaching staffs and things around the NHL. So maybe that has delayed whatever the Sabres wanted to get done. But here we are a week later and nothing else has been done.
Yeah, so no new thoughts on Eric Stahl or the Sabres management. I mean, I don't know if you saw the rumored leaked photos that Lou Lamoriello was in the Buffalo airport, and some people wondered if he was in town to talk about that job and, offered their opinions on whether that would be a good or bad addition for the Sabres. I wanted to ask you something that I saw mentioned, and I think right in your wheelhouse of at least having a analytical opinion on it. What do you think about potentially, if he's interested, and maybe you have a take on whether he would be, of Darcy Regier being that senior advisor, or maybe even Larry Quinn or somebody from the Sabres past that can bring a bit of that old Sabres magic when Lindy Ruff was the coach back into a franchise that's been missing that since some of these people left?
Well, Larry Quinn would be interesting, although I don't know that he has the wherewithal. I mean, he was more of a business side guy.
He's an advisor, though. If it's just kind of somebody to
hockey
offer
ops. I mean, he's also the guy who was influential in losing both Chris Drury and Daniel Briere and all the different players that left when the Sabres could have signed players to in-season extensions, but they had that dumb policy where they didn't negotiate in season. Then they'd wait, they'd get to the end of the season, and by then the player's like, well, why shouldn't I just test the market? And then the Sabres couldn't compete. The sticker shock would get them, and they could have had him at a discount when the player's at his most loyal and feeling as sabery as he could during the season. And that was Darcy Regier was the general manager, but part of the policy was, Larry Quinn was involved with that. Again, that's just perception. There was another name Darcy Regier coming back. That's a great question. I don't really know how it was left with Terry Pagula and Darcy Regier. Of course, they mend fences. Lindy Ruff came back, but Darcy Regier has kind of fallen off the face of the earth. I talk to people in hockey, and they're not sure what Darcy's up to, where he is. I mean, he's not one to quickly return a phone call or a text. And I don't know if he's off in Banff somewhere and enjoying retirement, or how plugged in he's been with the league. But yeah, it's an intriguing thought.
I'll throw a name out there, and this is maybe a nice segue to what we're doing next. Maybe the Sabres should hire Scott Loeffler or somebody from the Bandits organization as their advisor, because not only is that the model franchise of the NLL going for their third consecutive championship and having the best roster year after year in that league, they have like all of the things the Sabres are missing, the secondary scoring and the gritty goals. And it just seems like, even though it's a different sport, whatever the Sabres have needed, the Bandits have been able to find a lot quicker than the Sabres have. And maybe there's some sort of secret sauce that they have in that locker room down the hall that they can bring over and just sprinkle some of that Bandits dust onto the Sabres and turn the fortunes around.
Hey, if Eric Stahl can help out, I'm guessing Loeffler could help out exponentially more than that.
Actually, how about this? This came up in the newsroom yesterday, just as a fun exercise. But what if Terry Pegula decides, hey, these Bills, they're going really well. Why don't we trade general managers? The Bills are so good that Kevin Adams probably can't screw that up for a year. And Brandon Beane's done such a great job building this Bills roster. Maybe he can do something for the Sabres. If that were to happen, who misses the playoffs first?
Well, the Sabres, it would continue to miss the playoffs, I'm guessing.
Yeah, is that the question? Does Kevin Adams ruin the Bills faster than Brandon Beane can save the Sabres?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, the question would be, do the Bills miss the playoffs before the Sabres make the playoffs?
Yeah,
I would say the Sabres would make the playoffs because of Josh Allen, because Josh Allen would keep them competitive. You're going to be a better than 500 team as long as Josh Allen's healthy, I think. Before we get to John Gurtler, I just want to share this. This came from a friend of the show, Scooter Vertino. He sent me a picture of this. He found it on Facebook and sent it to me. So I went online. I was like, I had to buy it. It cost me $1.50, shipping included. Pedro Borbon, his rookie card, the former Reds pitcher. His rookie card is cheap, but I bought it for this reason, because how times have changed. This is a 1970 Topps card, and I'm going to show this. Hold it up to the camera, and it says, you can read it. Pedro's hobby is cockfighting. It says on the back, and that's on the back of a Topps card, a chicken with some boxing gloves. And I don't know what that baseball player's doing with his hands down. It looks like he's about to give that rooster a cup check. But I just think it's funny that Pedro, they just going ahead and put that on the back of his baseball card. So I got that. I'm going to put it back here with my other cards. Just had to have it.
All right.
Anything else before we get to John Gurtler, Jonah?
No, that's about it. I mean, the Bandits, I think, are the biggest sports story in town this week. And let's get on it. Let's preview these NLL Finals.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we're going to come right back with John Gurtler, who has just won the Tom Borrelli Award, which goes to the top media member in the National Lacrosse League, and is celebrating a milestone, as we're about to learn, in Buffalo broadcasting. The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400, or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solutions.
This is Charles Barkley, and you're listening to Tim Graham and Friends. Tim, this is your last favor. Anything else is going to cost you.
Welcome back to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. As promised, we are here with Tom Borrelli Award winner, John Gurtler. And You know the name, you know the voice. He's been in your lives, Bills and Sabres fans and Bandits fans for 30 years, 40. How many years? When did you? So Bills PA at the stadium and Sabres, you took over for Ted Darling on Sabres TV. How 30 or 40?
It's well, altogether with the Amerks, Sabres, Bills, and Bandits, it's my 40th year.
Oh, congratulations on the milestone. I didn't realize that.
Couple of years with the Amerks before I came up to Buffalo, so that added for the 40th year.
And not a native Western New Yorker.
No, I'm from Denver, Colorado.
So what a great career you've had, John. And we're going to talk about the Bandits and their NLL Finals series against the Saskatchewan Rush, which begins Friday night at KeyBank Center. But always been a fan of your work, the voice, the commercials. I mean, it's just such a distinctive voice. And whenever I hear it, especially on the car commercials, I always think, why don't we hear more John Gurtler?
That's very kind of you, Tim. And might I add to Bobby back, you are probably the most creative and beautiful writer that I have ever put my eyeballs across. You're fabulous. The Athletic should be so fortunate to have you because your work is just marvelous. It just sings. I think I sent you an email a couple of years ago. I can't remember what column it was, but it was so smooth. It was just smooth like an elevator.
Well, I have some of those in me still.
Tim Graham, ladies and gentlemen.
Every now and then I can pull one of those out. I don't do it often enough. As Jonah says, he always wonders why, how I can get away with not working as much as normal folks.
Maybe that's the secret, that you take your time with it and don't write so often, and that's where all the beautiful prose comes from.
That's where it comes out, man.
I'm a pained writer. So John, let's talk about your Tom Borrelli Award real quick, because you were just honored by the National Lacrosse League for its media award. Tom Borrelli, the former Buffalo News Bandits reporter, copy editor, passed away tragically while attending a sporting event in his free time. That's how much he loved sports. And tragic fall from the All High Stadium press box. And the Tom Borrelli Award, it means a lot to those in the business, and long overdue for you. Yeah. What are your thoughts here on your 40th year of your Buffalo career?
Yeah, it's been a great
winning
run.
This award. As you look back and you reflect, what comes to mind?
It's been a great run, and there's still a lot left, but probably the most exciting part was moving the family from Rochester to Buffalo to be a part of the Sabres operation. I mean, any broadcaster, as I started out in the Central Hockey League and then to the American Hockey League, but to make it to the show, the NHL was the ultimate piece of my career, and enjoyed every moment of it. Originally brought up to Buffalo to be the public relations director, which I was, and then did television with Jerry Korab. We had a segment on the game coverage of Kong's Corner. And then I worked with Danny Gare between periods as the host, brought the show in and did the hosting and the postgame show. And then unfortunately, Ted fell ill in the 90s. And because of my background doing play-by-play in the Central and the American League, Buffalo, the Sabres honored me with the position of doing play-by-play. So it was just a wonderful run with that. And then, John Livesey at the time, he was with the Buffalo Bills in an executive position, and he hired me to do the play-by-play and hosting with the Bills. And I did that for a handful of years. And then Livesey went back to work with the Sabres operation, and then he hired me to do the Bandits. And he said, Gertz, listen, it's just like hockey. Have fun with it, call it. We just want a little bit more exposure for the team, because they were bringing the team out of its ashes from the previous ownership. And at that time, he was with Tom Galvesano, and they really wanted to concentrate on building the Bandits up and back to the level that they were in the 90s and to the end of that reign. But so that's how I got started with the Bandits, and have been doing this is my 21st year with the Bandits.
So, John, how close did we come to not hearing your voice as prominently as we have? Because, as you mentioned, you came for a public relations job. At that time, were you just going to be in public relations for your career?
No, I think the Sabres organization, because of the time it was owned by the Knox family, the Amerks owned by the Knox family, they always promoted within and brought people up from Rochester. And they knew that I was the play-by-play guy for the Amerks for the seasons, and they knew that I had the talent to do that. They did dangle the carrot of saying, well, you do the PR work, but we also like you to work on television. And that's how I started with Jerry Korab and then later with Danny Gare. They knew that I wanted to do play-by-play, but, I knew with Ted Darling being the voice of the Sabres from the beginning, and then there was Rick Jenrette on radio, I knew that it would be long and, it'd be a pretty long time to wait, but an unfortunate situation with Ted, and I bannered my position with the organization and said I would really, 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 really like to do it. So they gave in, and then unfortunate with a change that management, because the Knox family, the boys got sick, Nordy and Seymour got sick at the same time. They brought another guy in who was kind of a whatever, and I was the first one to go.
Who was the guy?
Doug Moss.
Oh, Doug Moss. A brief stint as Sabres president.
Oh, do you think?
What was it had to be torture when the Sabres morphed their broadcast crews to go with the simulcast, and to have Rick Jenrette call both. And a lot of people have been critical of that over the years. It's difficult listen to simulcast on the radio sometimes, and you have different approaches that you should take when you do hockey on the radio versus hockey on television. And how did that go for you? Because there it was, you'd had your dream, and then it was taken away.
Yeah, it was devastating. I was thrown for a big loss on that one when it happened. Nothing against Rick Jenrette. Man, he was good on radio. He was good on TV. I just wondered why they did the simulcast. And I even went back to them after Doug Moss said, T. Gertz, we have to make a change. And I'm sorry, it's you. And I said, well, put me on radio. I don't care. I would love to do it. And because I was more attuned to doing radio anyway, television, I was of a different ilk than Ted, who did a great job. I mean, Ted was wonderful. And Rick was wonderful. I just did a game entirely differently. And I guess I was a lightning rod of criticism that the Sabres took into consideration and said, that's why you got to go. Doing radio is incredibly hard. That's why when we do a simulcast at home on radio for the Bandits, and we're on ESPN Plus for television. So they do a really nice television coverage for us, the Sabres organization, and the NLL. I mean, they put a lot of money into it, but I still, because of the rhythm that it requires, I still do a TV radio call, because I know in the back of my mind that, yes, there are viewers, and it's Marty Glickman, who was one of my mentors, and I got to work with Marty Glickman for a year. The Sabres hired him to help me, along with Jim Lorenz and Larry Playfair. He said, John, don't forget that if you're doing radio, you only have an audience that's going to be on probably 15 seconds. The first thing they want to know, the score, how much is time remaining, and what the quarter is. So I've always kept that in the back of my mind through Marty's teaching to me, and I use it on television too. So when you follow a Bandits game, it's not a criticism by anybody at all, but I do give the score a lot, even though the graphic is up there, it says the score, but it helps me remember that I do have radio listeners as well, especially when it's a simulcast. I paint the picture a little bit more for the radio listener than for the television. So it's a fine line, right? You don't want to insult the television viewer, but on the other hand, you want to paint the picture for the listener who, as I say, might be down in his workshop or in the garage working, or for those truckers, because when we're on 1520 the bat AM, that goes into 13 states. So we have a lot of truckers that listen to the game. So they want to know what's going on. You know, whether to the people outside of the Bandit land, just hearing a sportscast is one of the things that's so delightful on radio. It's good. So yeah, I guess I'm a big radio guy. My days of TV are over. You think?
I don't know. You still got it.
John, having been involved with this franchise from the very beginning, what were your impressions early on in the way the unique aspect of Bandit Land, the game presentation, how that differs from NHL and hockey games, how that's evolved and really became the standard for the league and something really unique? If a Sabres fan's never been to a Bandits game, it's quite a different experience.
It's a shocking difference. We get people with that all the time in their first experience of going to a Bandits game and being a part of Bandit Land. Initially started, as I say, in '92, and the Knox family agreed. At that time, was owned by two individuals. They owned the league. They owned all the players, and they put the players in the respective cities that the league was in. And they were the ones that designed the play. As they say, it was on a cocktail napkin at a New York Knicks game. Said, let's take this box lacrosse and turn it into the arena lacrosse, and you play on 200 by 85 feet on the synthetic turf surface. But then Russ Klein, and I can't remember the other guy's name because it's just on the top of my mind, but they were the ones that designed the play. Let's play music all the time. Let's have a PA announcer that goes stupid and wild. And we couldn't have picked a better guy than Chris Swinson, who he leads the league in just absolute beautiful tones and the way that he keeps the fans involved. Other arenas are trying to figure out how to emulate Chris because he does such a great job, but he brings the arena alive. And then when there's a quick stoppage in play, which is different because there's not a lot, but when there is, people get up and they dance and they have fun. And there's been quite a change, I would say, from the early days of the Bandits. While I was with the Sabres, I really didn't have any operations with the Bandits because it was a turnkey operation. These guys came in and they did the whole thing. The Knox family just agreed to say, okay, we're going to have this team come in and play in this major indoor lacrosse league. And the owners of this league said, no, it's going to be called the Buffalo Bandits. So the Knox family said, oh, okay. So what do we do? He said, well, you help with the arena, sell the tickets, promote the game. And they did a fabulous job. The Sabres operation did a great job because back in those, there was only 4 home games. It was only an 8-game season. So they built that level up, and it started the first night where, as they say, there's the stories. They had to hold the game 45 minutes because it couldn't sell the tickets fast enough because there was such a long line out of Memorial Auditorium to get people through the turnstiles. Once that game was over, the word just spread, and Buffalo sold out probably for, I would say, 8 to 10 years. Sold out. So that's how it kind of started.
And it's kind of been a bridge as things have either gone wrong with the local football team or the local hockey team. The Bandits have been a persistent winner. How do you feel your role is in that as ambassador, as the voice of the team, as the voice of a winner, as the voice of the team that's getting its banner raised in KeyBank Center over the years? How does that feel on a personal level, John?
Well, it's great. And even the first year that I started in 2004, we went to the finals. We finished 8-8. We did a Cinderella run and made it to the finals. Unfortunately, we lost to Calgary. And then in 2006, we lost to Colorado. So there was a lot of losing after then until 2008 when we won finally and beat then the team was called Portland. And then that was a trail from 2008 up until we started to get back into the real deep run of the playoffs. That wasn't until 2016. So there was a lot of losing in between there. Not that it was a total loss. I mean, Bandits played extremely well and always a very talented team. But I always remember coming through, especially when we lose to Toronto all the time, and then I would come back across the border and, especially from the U.S. side of the fence, all of the U.S. border agents would say, what the hell happened when I come back the next morning after the game? So I'd have to give them the rundown. But now it's been a great run for 5 straight years into the finals. This is, I would think, the most talented team that Buffalo has put together, and that's all due to Steve Dietrich, who's the general manager and defensive coordinator. But yeah, I've just noticed in the 20 years, the game itself has changed dramatically. It's more athletic. It's faster. The hitting is harder. It's not as what they call it a guerrilla show used to be, where guys and they drop their gloves and they have big fights. That's a rarity, just like it is in the NHL anymore. The athleticism in this game is just phenomenal. When you see the way they pass that ball and the off looks, and it kind of reminds me of the days of Alexander Mogilny when he was the one that created that off look pass. He'd be looking a different way. And Connor McDavid does the same thing. I mean, he'll be looking this way and he'll throw the pass over to the other side, which is phenomenal. And that's how these guys do it, behind the back, through the legs. Chase Fraser got national attention in the game when we just finished in Vancouver last Sunday night by doing a phenomenal move and a goal. That he scored, and he twisted it between his legs and then hit one side of the pipe from Vancouver and went to the other side of the pipe. That's how just perfectly dialed he was in. And, it happens within a millisecond.
How do you
It's a gorgeous game, and I think it bears itself out when you see, and especially in recent years, when ESPN does its top 10, and it has been loaded with lacrosse, whether it's outdoor or indoor.
Right.
A great lacrosse play is just a thing of beauty.
Yes, it is. It's fabulous to watch.
Yeah, it is amazing. I'm sorry, Jonah, I cut you off there.
Well, I wanted to ask John how he thinks. He mentioned this is maybe the most talented team the Bandits have had, and I would tend to agree. How have the Bandits been able to get this good? Not merely 2-time champions going for a 3rd champion and 5th time in the finals, but they have the top 2 leading scorers in the league, maybe the best goaltender in the league. Their secondary scoring is probably better than anybody in the league. They needed a defenseman last year, and they go and they get Dawson, who's an all-time great, one of the best defensemen in the league. All-time great player as the coach. I mean, how have they been able to compile this and keep it under the salary cap and just have really almost an all-star team of players here in Buffalo?
It's been the dedication, Jonah, to Buffalo's intent of winning. And I think ever since they made the transition, when Mr. Pegula bought the Sabres, he also bought the Bandits. The Bandits came a part of the package. And he's always been a part of the operation to say, okay, what do we need in order to carry on the stability of not only the Sabres, but also the Bandits. So the organization has done a great job from the Sabres side of the fence to say, let's keep the Bandits afloat and let's make sure that they have the finest talent that's available. And that also bleeds down to Scott Loeffler, who's the senior director of lacrosse operations, where he just does a fabulous job coordinating everything from a business standpoint. And then to work with Steve Dietrich, former goaltender, been around, 3-time general manager of the year, NLL Hall of Famer as a goaltender, just a fabulous lacrosse mind. And he was the one that found Dane and drafted him, and then found the left-handed side to help him in Josh Byrne. I would imagine that Buffalo pays quite a luxury tax over and above the very small salary cap that this league operates on. But in order to keep these kind of players, and you've seen Dane, he's dedicated himself to live here in Buffalo. He got married. He's built a house. He has certainly built his brand. As I had mentioned to him last week at practice, I said, I'm just so proud of you, Dane, to go out not only to be the all-star player that you are and the MVP, he was 2-time MVP already, to build your brand in an area to say, I'm dedicated to live in Buffalo. And, that speaks volumes. I'm just a marvelous guy. All of these guys that I have seen over the course of my coverage of sports, just the nicest, down-to-earth, wonderful fellas in earnest. And yes, they still have jobs. It's just like the old NFL back in the 50s and 60s and the old NHL back in the early days. Everybody had a job in addition to playing hockey or football. These guys have jobs, and they have some of them have very good jobs, and some of them make money now playing lacrosse and promoting the game and themselves, like Dane, like Josh, like many of the guys that played during the summertime, so they could substantiate themselves to I would say, a good living. I wouldn't say out of the ordinary living. We're not talking 30 mil a year.
You mentioned Steve Dietrich, not only doing a great job as the general manager and a former really good goaltender in the league, but for our listeners and our viewers, it show you a little bit of how this sport's a little bit different. When there's a team scuffle at the end of the game and the GMs need to get on the field and join it, he's willing to do that, which I don't think you see that with the Sabres or too many NHL teams.
He's been on the bench a couple of times and he lost. I don't say he loses his temper, but he voices his opinion accordingly when there's a little jawing going on, maybe jawing with one of the coaches or one of the players or the referees. I mean, he'll put his two cents worth in, but yeah, it's such the game has changed so dramatically from that old-fashioned style of lacrosse where there was a fight almost every 2 minutes or whatever like that, or you had players, unlike hockey too, that you don't have the fighters anymore. I mean, you've got tough guys, and sure they still fight in hockey, but the fight in lacrosse is a rarity. And when you do, as I called it on the radio, it's a yard sale. They take all of their equipment off and throw it, and then they start throwing punches. So I've always marveled about hockey, why those guys just don't drop their buckets, because they have windshields on there now too. So I'm saying the guys' knuckles must be just pummeled. But in lacrosse, they take their helmets off.
Yeah.
Let's go.
The National Lacrosse League awards have been coming out this week. As we've mentioned, John Gurtler, winner of the Tom Borrelli Award, Dane Smith, the Offensive Player of the Year. That's been announced. MVP has not been announced as we're recording this, but a player that you really perked up, John. We were talking off the air before we recorded. Kyle Buchanan won the Teammate of the Year award.
Yeah.
And I could tell in your feedback that this is a special player. What would you say to people who don't know what Kyle Buchanan does for the Bandits to the point where he's considered Teammate of the Year in the entire league?
Tim, if you're a viewer, you just look at number 91, or if you come to the game, you look at number 91. That's Kyle Buchanan. He's not the biggest player in the game, but he's what we call a water bug. Jumps over the bench, and today's game is so defined between offense and defense. So when the ball transitions back out to center, down into the defensive zone, the defense comes out, and when the ball transitions, the offense comes out. He's always the one over the boards and on the field first, along with Dane and Josh, Chris or Dehoka or Chase Fraser. I mean, the list goes on. 91 is always there. And he does the dirty work. He's willing to go into the corner to get the ball. He's willing to take a hit. He can set picks just unbelievably. As I tell people, I said, what's familiar about lacrosse and basketball? The pick and roll. I mean, the pick and roll is a design like in basketball. That's why I say lacrosse, indoor lacrosse, box lacrosse has got such a nice piece on it, because you see all those picks. And you see all those picks in basketball too, the pick and roll. And he's probably one of the best that can do it. He can set up players as well, and really get an opportunity to get himself into position and score goals too. And he had a career run this year by scoring, 34, 37 goals. It does it so beautifully as well, whether it's behind the back or flying or, there's no ugly goal by Kyle Buchanan, and just a hell of a teammate.
At 37 years old and 165 pounds.
Yeah. He's got a hell of a degree. He went to Robert Morris, I think. Played his college across there. All these guys have unbelievable lacrosse background, whether it's in box or field.
John,
and the game is growing, intensively into the U.S. That's why we want to attract more U.S. players.
Well, it can't grow any more in KeyBank Center because the seats have been sold out. If they would need to build some sort of extension or annex or expand in some way, because this series against the Saskatchewan Rush, it's going to be a full building starting tomorrow night at KeyBank Center with game 1. Game 2 is Sunday And then a game 3, if necessary, won't be until Saturday, May 24th
Right.
at KeyBank Center. John, what are your thoughts on this series? And I know that we can probably get into all kinds of nitty gritty, but in a general sense, how are you feeling about this one heading in?
Two of the best teams in the NLL meeting, both the 13-3 during the regular season. You know, Buffalo won the tiebreaker because the Bandits beat the Rush in Saskatchewan on March 1st, so they won that tiebreaker. So it's 13-5. They're both 3-0 in the playoffs going into this meeting, this best of 3 series. And they, like the Bandits, are very talented at every position. I mean, the forwards are very creative. There's a brotherhood, as they call it, from Saskatchewan and the Rush. They go together and they act together. There's no real big superstar. There are guys that are just collecting the goals accordingly. And their transition game is great. They're good goal scorers there. Goaltending is good. Defense is stellar. I mean, and it's just a kind of a carbon copy of Buffalo. I just think Buffalo has the edge because of the depth. But, you know, Saskatchewan, as I recall the game back on March 1st, they jumped out pretty heavy on us. And then the Bandits had to battle back for a come from behind to post it. And there again, any Bandit fan will tell you that in 2016, our hearts were broken, if I can speak in that vernacular, even though as a good journalist or a broadcaster, you can never say our, right? The Bandits.
You're an employee of the team.
I could say our. So, you know, they lost to Saskatchewan 2-0 in 2016. Game was tied. X number of seconds left. Jeff Cornwall, former Buffalo Bandit, scores the game winner, and the dagger goes into the heart of the Bandits, and they lost that one. And that was a real tough loss for the Bandits. So there's a table to be turned here, Tim. There's a page to be written.
Grudge match.
How likely do you see the Bandits potentially sweeping the series? Because I think there's some fans, media, maybe even the league office that would really like to see a game 3. And the Bandits have been so dominant, it sort of seems like they're on an undefeated playoff run, and it almost feels like they're continuing that going into the final series.
Yeah, they played exceptionally well against Vancouver, those 2 series. And I thought Vancouver was just incredibly talented, and they had a lot of enthusiasm, of course, coached by Kurt Milowski, just an incredible lacrosse mind. But to do the evaluation, will this be a 2-game series? Man, it's hard to say. I mean, both teams, they can just react. I think Saskatchewan probably works better north to south, east to west. They move the ball a hell of a lot better. The Bandits are a little bit more powerful and creative. That's why Dehuka Nanakok has his own game. Chase Fraser has that unbelievable release. Dane with his 2-steps cuts, the ball handling, and Josh Byrne. And then you've got the size of Chris Kluche. And don't forget about 91 that will just scurry around and help you. It might confuse Saskatchewan a little bit. And would it be an opportunity for them to take it in 2? Yeah, it's on the table. I don't know. I would say it would be tough, but it could be done in 2.
It's amazing to think about the Bandits' depth. If I'm not mistaken, you just mentioned a bunch of great scoring players that the Bandits have, and I don't think you mentioned Ian McKay, who leads them in points and goals.
Yeah,
here in the postseason, he's been the leading scorer all 3 games.
Yeah, I left Ian McKay out as kind of the glazing on the cake, because that guy has just come around. He's been called to duty to play out in the front door. His athletic prowess, obviously, with his great lacrosse background, growing up with the game, going to the University of Vermont, learning the game and its tendencies. But then, you know, having to go up front, and the Bandits knew at that time, even when they drafted him, they knew he had this offensive talent, but he was certainly a defenseman and a transition player to begin with. That was his job. That's why they call him the Swiss Army knife. But now he's got this unbelievable scoring prowess that's just, has it amazed everybody? No. Just if you're a regular Bandit fan, because you expect it from Ian McKay. Once he gets the ball, he's probably going to score in some way, shape, or form. It won't be the prettiest of goals, but it'll be the best of goals for the Bandits in order to build the lead substantially or to make a comeback. He's one of the players that would probably ignite a comeback in a situation in a game when he's able to score a couple of goals. And as you know, Jonah, the game of lacrosse is a game of runs, just like basketball. Man, if you get a couple of goals and then all of a sudden something happens with I don't know what it is, but you get a game of runs going, and you'll see some of the teams go on a 7-goal run. Certainly of a concern with a team like Saskatchewan because they have the ability to do that.
Obviously, home arena advantage would be heavy for Buffalo if it does reach a game 3. But what kind of impact does that long break in between? I know that that's not unusual because you want the TV audience, but to go 6 days in between a game 2 and game 3 potentially, does that help Saskatchewan overcome being on the road for game 3 at all?
Yeah, it would help Saskatchewan, but they were the ones that have to come back at that time near the end of the week in order to prepare for game 3. Buffalo comes right back home after the game on Sunday. I would say Monday. We don't fly charter, so it would be a Monday commercial flight home. Then remember, these guys got jobs during the week, so they have responsibilities in order to carry on their other profession, keep into shape. As they say, a lacrosse player in the NLL is probably the most loneliest job because they don't see their buddies until the next week because you're only allowed to practice once a week in the NLL. So Buffalo, for example, generally practices on a Wednesday night up in Oakville because it's easier for a lot of the guys, even though we have 10 to 12 players live in Buffalo during the regular season, and the rest of the players live within a proximity of Ontario, that they're able to come to Oakville in the beautiful Toronto Rock Athletic Center. And so that's where they practice. And then for this game, Tim, they'll probably practice on Friday night in Buffalo next week if there's a game 3. So, yeah, it's funny. I did ask the players at practice last Saturday, how did you feel with the week off? Because, they had the week off after the Vancouver series because Saskatchewan and Halifax had to battle out for their games, or one game from last weekend. So a lot of the guys, because it's such a veteran team, I think they relish the point of having that week off. I mean, you do get beat up pretty badly. I mean, realize the fact that, these guys don't hardly wear any pads. They wear chest protectors, obviously, with the ball and its velocity of speed anywhere from 100 to 110 miles an hour. And they wear a combination of old-fashioned pads up here and then elbow pads. But down below, maybe a cup. But shot blocking, I'm just marveled at the fact that how many shots are blocked by the Buffalo players. And like Paul Dawson, who led the league in block shots with 53. I mean,
they're not running around on plush carpet either. I mean, that is, it's not.
But they're taking
concrete.
shots.
It's just
like
plywood.
Hockey players, you can get shots. I mean, you can take a shot because they got those beautiful shin pads and the pants are padded. These guys are taking shots. Like, good Lord, I don't know how he does it. Just like an Animal House, that's going to leave a mark.
Hey, John, were you aware of this? Maybe you are. Talking about players that have jobs during the week and the travel going back and forth. Did you know there's a player on the Saskatchewan roster that lives and works in Western New York?
Yeah, I think he went to Canisius, right? Well, who is it?
Matt Hosick. Yeah, he's from Port Perry, Ontario. I was looking at his record thinking maybe he played for the Bandits before, and that's originally how he got to Western New York, but I don't see that. But he works at Wentcorp and Cheektowaga, and so he spends his weeks in Buffalo, then gets on the plane to Saskatchewan for those games. So he'll have easier travel for game 3 than the rest of his teammates.
I did not know that. As our current president of the United States said, I did not know that.
Well, you can slip that onto your card for game 1 tomorrow night.
I'll write it down right now.
Hey, John, I'm playing a hunch here when I ask this question, but you're not a native Western New Yorker. We've established that at the beginning. Did you practice or come up with any kind of purpose with the way you say Buffalo? You enunciate it in such a way. I don't know that you even realize this, but when you say it, it really has, it's very distinguished.
No, I didn't come up with it at all. I did major in speech and drama in college. I was more of an actor than I was of a regular broadcaster, but I did not know that. I don't have that. When I first moved to Rochester, a guy pulled me aside and said, it's not Rochester, it's Rochester, Rochstir. It's Rochester. Okay. I'll try to follow it as well. And I always used to say, "Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Rochester Americans hockey." No, Rochester Americans hockey.
Well, I recall when the owner of the team didn't know how to say what it was. Tom Golisano used to call them the Mercs.
Oh yeah,
and I was like, well, maybe Tom just did not pay that close attention until he owned the hockey team.
right. But give Golisano credit; he was the one that stepped forward, Dan DePofi and John Livesey, who said, "Let's bring the Bandits back out of the ashes," because the previous ownership, which I will not mention, but they just burned everything down. And unfortunately, at that time, the Bandits were only attracting anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 people a game.
Well, John, I can't thank you enough for this. Very kind of you, and congratulations on the Tom Borrelli Award.
Thank you.
Do you have any memories of Tom Borrelli that you want to share?
Yes, I do. Tom was the first guy that stepped forward when I got the job, when I started in 2004. He came into the broadcast booth on his own, introduced himself. I said, "Tom, it is an honor to meet you because I've heard nothing but, and I've read all of his stories of the Bandits." I said, "You're an amazing encyclopedia." Tom helped me right at the beginning. He helped me with statistics. He helped me with the nuances of the game. As I had mentioned before we went on to this segment, Tim, that he was always available for a halftime, because I was doing the games by myself at that time with Randy Mearns, and we always needed a halftime guest. And so I would scurry around to see who was here. And like, Tom was always available. And I would say, "Tom, can you come on the air with us and talk a little bit about the game?" Always would do that, very genuine in stepping forward, and it spoke to a point where he explained to me the nuances of the game, which I thought was great. Randy Mearns and Darius Kilgore taught me the game. John Tavares and Steve Dietrich continue to teach me the game, but Tom was the one at the beginning, probably the only guy that I met in the press box that came forward into the booth and said, "My name is Tom Borrelli." I said, "Jesus, Tom, I know you, buddy. I mean, followed you for a long time, and it's great to meet you." So that was, that's the point of how much Tom meant to me. And as I had mentioned to one of my constituents, and also Brett Frood, who's the commissioner of the NLL, who congratulated me. And I said, "Yeah, Tom would be very proud of his student." And that's the way I'll leave it.
Congratulations again, John. And
Thanks,
you
Tim,
for taking time to do this. It's long overdue. I've wanted you on the podcast, and this is a great opportunity to celebrate your career and also talk about a potential Bandits championship.
Yep.
Not to jinx it,
nope.
But starts tomorrow night, Friday night, depending on when you're listening to this. Friday night at KeyBank Center against the Saskatchewan Rush. Game 2 Sunday, and then Game 3, if necessary, next Saturday, May the 24th, back at KeyBank Center. John, thank you.
And could I put one more plug in? And all games will
as
be
many as you want.
And all games, exclusive radio coverage, will be on WGR Sports Radio 550.
Beautiful. Beautiful. John,
thank you, Tim.
So
thank you, No.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.